Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Christos anesti, alithos anesti. Most of you receive this nugget on a Thursday morning or sometime during Thursday. By that time I will, please God, God willing, be somewhere on the border between Poland and Ukraine. I'm going with a friend, a journalist friend, Tim Stanley from the Daily Telegraph, who's writing about Easter, which is next week in the Julian calendar, both for the Orthodox and the Greek Catholics. I'm going with him, not really under Nazareans' auspices. My dear mother is helping me and a good donor, because I'm not really going to somewhere where we can talk about persecuted Christians, except, of course, they're being persecuted by other Christians in some sense. The Russians persecuting their brothers or their cousins in Ukraine. But I'm going to show solidarity with the Ukrainian Catholics, who are the largest group of Christians in Western Ukraine. The West knows very little about them, and they were terribly persecuted during communist times, and showing solidarity with them, helping in some way, doing something of a mission I think the Lord wants me to do. So I'd ask for your prayers. Please God, it's just a short visit, and we hope to be with all those who have been suffering, but celebrating also Easter next weekend. We Westerners, of course, have just celebrated Easter, and so we have much to give thanks to God for, but I would ask for your prayers. There's a terribly modern phenomenon, and I think a particularly Western phenomenon, probably a fruit of the Enlightenment, to think that we must not only explain everything, but be able to understand everything. That, while not denying the use of reason, because we're reasonable creatures, removes not only the need for faith, but also the place of wonder and mystery. A cold, explicable world would be a grim place to live. No enchantment, no myths, no legends, and yes, no faith. The resurrection is a mystery, but for the Christian it's a fact. The essence of the gospel is the words the disciples hear on returning from Emmaus. Yes, it's true, the Lord has risen from the dead. It's the constant word of the first preaching of the apostles and disciples, that this was no fantasy, no 19th century vague feeling that in some way Christ lived on in the hearts of his followers, poppycock. No one would go to their death for a vague feeling. We ate and drank with him, they say. We are his witnesses. This is the joy we proclaim during this entire great 50 days of the Easter season. The power of the Christian faith is that from the ignominious death on the cross on Good Friday, the shocking and shameful punishment of a criminal, comes the stupendous news of Easter Sunday. He has risen. That news, that good news, is then proclaimed throughout the known world and changes the lives of those who believe. Captives are indeed set free, the blind see, and the lame walk. The downtrodden are lifted up, and those without hope have something they have never had before, what St. Peter calls in his first letter, a sure hope, because of the resurrection of Jesus. Through the power of the cross and resurrection, the martyrs will prefer to die than to renounce Christ. The most foul tortures will fail to get believers to deny him, and weak, vain, and cowardly men and women will be transformed, like Peter himself, into giants of the faith. For me, this gospel word of St. Peter in his first letter, chapter 1, is both particularly helpful and comforting. St. Peter says that God, in raising Jesus from the dead, gave him glory for that very reason, so that you would have faith and hope in God. The resurrection, the real physical resurrection, was so that we might have faith and hope in God. Doubting Thomas would have been no use if he'd stayed doubting. He had to become believing Thomas if he was to spread the good news. Doubt no longer, said Jesus, but believe. Do we have difficulties? Do we struggle? Do we lack comprehension? Of course. But we recall the words of the recently canonized Saint of England, St. John Henry Newman. 1,000 difficulties do not make a doubt. If I doubted the resurrection, I would not be a Christian. It would be wine, women, and song for me, and not necessarily in that order. Doubt no longer, but believe. Our Redeemer liveth. Happy Easter. Brethren, rejoice, be perfected, be comforted, be of the same mind, be at peace, and the God of peace and love will be with you.